What up, G? Doing back at it again, trying to make YouTube videos. Not working so well. So you may have watched one of my earlier videos where I talked about the importance of building an emergency fund. Link to the video up there. But you might have come out of that and said, well, that's well and good, but if I can't afford to save, how can I build up an emergency fund? And my response to that is, I hear you, things like this are never really easy. But what I'll do is I'll run through 3 different ways that you can make it happen. Alright, the first solution is for those of you who end up getting paid a decent wage but still end up getting to the end of the month and you look at your bank balance and you're like, shit, there's nothing here. Why? Because you end up spending it on shit. Hold up, I'm not trying to judge before you click off the video. I'm like, this guy is telling me that I spend so much money. I totally understand. I mean, people get accustomed to a certain lifestyle. They end up spending their money, and they think that that the trinkets and things that they buy are necessities, are really they're luxuries, and people don't really realize that. And I hear you. Some of you might say, well, what's the point of living if you're not gonna spend your money on things that you like, on the luxuries, on the niceties, on the trinkets, etc. But if you're really serious about saving, you're gonna have to make some sacrifices. Okay, so if I basically described you in a nutshell, then really what you need is the concept called paying yourself. So I first came across this term in a book called The Automatic Millionaire by David Buck. Link to the Amazon book in the description. Okay, so the idea of paying yourself first is actually fairly simple. The way it works is, at the start of the month when you first receive your paycheck, you immediately send a percentage of that amount into a separate account. This might be a savings account, investment account, whatever. But it's important you do this before you spend any of that money. And it might be tough when you first start doing this. You're not accustomed to having less money in your account and it becomes a pain, but slowly over time you'll get used to the fact that you have less money in there, and slowly your spending habits will actually change to reflect that. And who knows, you might move away from those luxury 3-ply loo rolls and I don't know, get to the bog standard single plies, eh? A tip that might make this whole paying yourself first system work for you is basically to automate it as much as possible. Use standing orders, direct debits, and effectively move the money without you having to ever see it. And actually makes it better for you psychologically that you don't think, oh, my money's being moved to the side and I'm not going to know what's happening to it. It happens behind the scenes and you don't really need to worry about it. If you're new to this concept, I suggest don't go head first and, I don't know, save 20% of your income. You might not be able to afford that. Start somewhere simple, like 4, 5, 6%, somewhere in that region. And you can always work your way up if you decide I can save more. The real key here is that you don't want to find yourself tapping into that savings account on a frequent basis to cover your expenses. I mean, you should have enough to cover your utility bills, your council tax, basic costs. So have a play around and make sure that your percentage works for you. Okay, so that's paying yourself first. But what happens if you're living on a fairly low wage and paying yourself first really is an option? My suggestion is to build a side hustle. God knows side hustles are a flashy word on YouTube these days, but in basic terms, side hustle is just an additional job that you slot in and around your current main job, and basically have it as a means of making a slight amount of money just to boost up the amount of money you're earning on a day-to-day basis. In this case, developing a side hustle is actually a pretty good way of building up your wages just enough so you can save. However, whenever I talk to people about side hustles, the first thing they say is, how do I come up with one? How can I figure this out? It's so complicated. There's so many things you can do. And the first thing I say to them is, what's your skill set? What are your interests? What are your hobbies? How can you convert that into a means of making money? I mean, with the internet kicking around, you can literally do whatever. And it could be from the comfort of your own home. And you could be a virtual assistant, you could sell digital art. I mean, you could do something more hands-on if that's more of your thing. The options are literally endless. The trick here is to find something sustainable. I mean, there's loads of side hustles that you can do and loads that pay like ridiculous amounts of money, but some of them are complicated, some of them are long, some of them are boring. If you find something that you're interested in, you have a passion for, you're more likely to stick to it. And it's most likely to be sustainable in the long term. And who knows, it might end up taking over your initial source of income and become your primary source. Okay, that's about as much as I want to talk about on side hustles. I can go in a bit more depth in future videos if you want to talk about actual ways, systems of coming up with side hustles. I've got a few ideas on what I can do on that. So if you're interested, leave a comment down below and I'll get to those videos eventually. Finally, this is a tough one, but if you can't find a side hustle and paying yourself first just isn't an option, then the real alternative here is to budget. Look, I'll be real with you. Budgeting isn't fun. It's boring, it's tedious, it's long-winded. But if financial stability is really important to you, it might be something you have to consider, at least in the short term. I'll link below one of my favorite budgeting templates. It's bestowed to us by the money-saving expert God himself, Martin Lewis. Giving us budgeting tips every day to save our lives. Have a go at filling it in, being honest with yourself. No one's going to really look at it except for you. The more honest you are with yourself, the more it's going to be of use for you. So once you've filled in the budget, go through it and be ruthless. How can you cut costs? Maybe you don't need that 12 gig mobile monthly data plan. Cut it down to 4 gig. Maybe you don't need, I don't know, takeaways twice a week. You can cut it down to once a week and make home cooked food for half the cost. I don't know, maybe look through at your coffee and latte spending. Maybe you can buy a coffee machine instead and make coffee for half the price. Go through your spending, just be ruthless and see how can I save as much money as possible. And I get it, this sucks, it's not ideal, but I see budgeting as a short-term solution. It's not going to work in the long term, it's just not really that sustainable. So while you're doing this for the first few months, I would suggest also considering having a think about how you can build a side hustle. Try and find ways of earning more money in the long term. I mean, that might even be just having a career change entirely, you know, find a new job. It might have to be as drastic as that. But while you're budgeting the short term, you need to have those long-term ideas and plan. How are you going to get more money into the household and effectively save more money? Okay, that's pretty much all I have time for this week. So if you've got any questions, leave them down below in the comments. I'll try and help out as much as I can. If you enjoyed the video, like the video. If you want to see more like this, subscribe down below. This has been JN, hustling every week, getting you videos on personal finance so that you can be better with your money. See you next week.